faithfully convey value, interpret great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today, we're introducing the historical novel Empress Dowager Cixi, the complete biography. It starts from Emperor Xianfeng's death, spanning nearly half a century of Empress Dowager Cixi's political career. Its author, Gao Yang, a renowned writer, established his pivotal position in historical fiction through this work. Gao Yang believed both historical recording and fiction writing should pursue truth. The former seeks factual truth, while the latter emotional truth. Thus, he organically blended authentic historical materials with fictional plots. While respecting core facts, he boldly imagined specific plot lines to make characters more human. Empress Dowager Cixi, the complete biography. At nearly 2.7 million words, it features hundreds of characters and encompasses vast subjects. This posed enormous challenges. The slightest misstep could make the work superficial, leaving readers feeling it's trivial and hollow. Yet Gao Yang pierced through appearances to identify a key element, the root cause of constant conflicts within the ruling clique, namely the struggle for power. Thus, while covering all aspects of Cixi's life, we primarily focus on her political maneuvers. The book first divides Cixi's political activities into broad stages. After finishing the book, one easily sees her political life began with the 1861 ECU coup. During this coup, she allied with Prince Gong Yushin and Empress Dowager Cixi, arresting 8 regents to overthrow the existing power structure. This marked the beginning of her power seizure. Post-coup, their alliance persisted, sharing power yet constantly scheming against each other. In 1881, Empress Dowager Cixi passed away. In 1884, Prince Gong Yushin was expelled from the power center. Cixi began ruling alone, and this solo reign divides her political life into 2 distinct phases. In the first phase, her relationship with Prince Gong and Cixi also had 2 sub-phases. In the first sub-phase, their political alliance remained solid. But in the second, the alliance fractured. Their relationship became primarily adversarial, triggered by a landmark event, An Dihai's execution. In the following segment, we'll explore these dramatic shifts in detail, using relevant content from the book. First, let's examine the Xinyu coup. In Cixi's life, the Xinyu coup marked the crucial first step in her ascent to power. Before this, she was merely consort to Emperor Xianfeng. Later, when her son became emperor, she gained the title of Empress Dowager. But her actual power was limited. It was just an honorary title. She faced the political structure established by Emperor Xianfeng before his death. 8 regents, led by Sushin, assisting Empress Dowager Cixi in joint governance. Cixi was completely excluded. How did this situation arise? This stemmed largely from Emperor Xianfeng's perception of Cixi during his lifetime. On one hand, she bore Xianfeng his only son, so he felt she deserved certain privileges. But on the other, her evident power obsession made him feel she needed restraint. The book recounts how Xianfeng summoned Sushan before dying, instructing him to control Cixi and prevent her from bullying the meek Empress Dowager Cixi. Still, she received her formal title. Xianfeng viewed Sushan as pivotal for stability, given Sushan's political advantages. Though Manchu, he broke ethnic barriers by championing Han Chinese generals like Zheng Guofan, Zhuo Zantong, and Hu Linyi, earning broad support. Moreover, Sushan held key positions: Minister of Imperial Household, Grand Counselor, and commanded the Imperial Guard. The other 7 regents were powerful allies with aligned interests. Sushan's attitude towards Cixi and Cixi mirrored Xianfeng's exactly. The Xinyu coup was essentially a power struggle between Cixi and Sushan. Sushan was arguably Cixi's toughest opponent. Isolated, she knew defeating him was essential for power, requiring allies to succeed. She allied with Empress Dowager Cixi and Prince Gong. Seizing power required meticulous steps, The first step was securing legitimacy, establishing her rightful position in the power structure. Cixi knew she had no power or influence. Her greatest asset was being the biological mother of the new emperor. That was her leverage, and she had to use it wisely. So right after Emperor Shanfeng's death, she demanded to be named Empress Dowager, since she was the emperor's birth mother. Sushu. When Sushin and others initially refused, Cixi feigned illness in her quarters, vowing not to meet Empress Dowager Xian until granted the title. In the end, this tactic worked. She was soon named Empress Dowager. Of course, you might wonder, how did Cixi pull this off? How could she get her way so immediately? There were two main reasons. First, as the emperor's birth mother, her claim was entirely legitimate. Second, Empress Dowager Xian was notoriously indecisive and meek. Right after Xianfeng's death, she met the regents as Empress Dowager, but handling just a few routine matters overwhelmed her. Meanwhile, Cixi had secretly assisted with memorials during Xianfeng's reign, proving highly capable. So Xian thought having Cixi's help would be ideal. But Qing Dynasty rules forbade any palace women besides the Empress Dowager from interfering in state affairs. But Xian personally approached Sushin to grant Cixi the title. Sushin reluctantly agreed, but deliberately tried to rank the two empresses dowager. Cixi insisted they share equal status, with no hierarchy. Ultimately, she convinced Xian that all documents required both their seals to be valid. The second step was planning informants. The title alone offered limited benefits, so Cixi targeted Jing Shou, one of the 8 regents, who'd married Shanfeng's sister, making him her relative. Moreover, he knew his regent position stemmed from connections rather than actual prestige or influence. This position should have gone to Prince Gong. He wasn't close to Sushan, unlike the other 6 loyalist regents, so he gained nothing. This made him lay low, fearing he'd pointlessly offend Prince Gong. Cixi also cited Oboi, a regent executed during Kangshi's reign, to warn Jing Shao, ultimately turning him into her informant. The third step was finding allies. The first ally was Empress Dowager Xian. As for why she chose Xian, we've already covered that earlier. She was indecisive, always relying on Cixi for help, and with her Empress Dowager title, she was perfect to use as a shield. The second ally was more crucial. Prince Gong Xishen, who was Emperor Shanfeng's half-brother. Shanfeng was actually raised by Xishen's mother, but after Yishen's mother died, the brothers fell out over what posthumous title to grant her, resulting in Yishen being sidelined thereafter. So both Yishen and Cixi were political outsiders at this time. They sympathized with each other, forming a solid basis for alliance. But communicating with Yishen proved tricky. As sister-in-law and brother-in-law, direct contact could spark rumors. Moreover, after the Anglo-French forces occupied Beijing, Cixi fled with Xianfeng to the Chengde mountain resort. Yishen stayed in Beijing to negotiate with the forces. They were too far apart and under surveillance, so Cixi resorted to a self-harm ploy. She found a pretext to brutally beat her trusted eunuch An Dehai and sent him back to the capital. Actually, An Dehai seized the chance to go to Beijing, find Yishen, and urge him to come to Chengde to plot against Sushin. During their discussion, Cixi tested Yishen by proposing he join the Grand Council and work with the 8 regents. This forced Yishen to reveal his true thoughts. He felt he was extraordinary and had no desire to work with Sushin's crew. Once said, it couldn't be taken back. Yixin agreed to join Cixin in overthrowing Sushin. The coup conditions were ripe, but they needed a pretext to justify it, and soon appeared. At that time, a minister named Zhou Zupei had suffered much from Sushan and sought revenge, so he instructed his student, Dan Yuanshan, submitted a memorial implying the regents were usurping power and suggesting the Empress Dowager's rule from behind a screen. After consulting Xian, Cixi decided not to respond immediately. waiting to see Sushin's reaction. Sushin and his faction flew into a rage, drafted an edict in the emperor's name denouncing Deng Yuanqin, and demanded the Empress Dowagers seal it. The question was, should they issue this edict? The two sides argued fiercely. Shockingly, scandalized Sushin showed no restraint, shouting obscenities before the two Empresses Dowager and the young emperor. Though the Empresses Dowager ultimately yielded, Sushin alienated everyone, revealing his fatal flaw, extreme arrogance. Beyond his fellow regents, almost no one at court supported him. All feared life under his absolute rule, so everyone hoped for his downfall. Sushin's outburst terrified even Empress Dowager Xian. Seizing this moment, Cixi convinced Xian to immediately arrest Sushan and his faction. Next came the Sinew coup. Thanks to meticulous planning, the coup felt almost procedural. Cixi and Yashin had finalized their plans in Chengde. Yixin returned to Beijing early to prepare, while Cixi pressured Sushan to expedite Shanfen's funeral. She insisted the coronation couldn't wait, forcing Sushin to escort Shanfeng's coffin while she traveled light to Beijing. Back in Beijing, Cixi urgently summoned elder statesmen like Zhou Zupei, tearfully recounting how Sushin bullied orphans and widows. Zhou Zupei proposed punishing Sushin immediately. Cixi feigned surprise before accepting. Nixon then publicly read a secret edict. This edict had actually been prepared long in advance. During the coup, regents Zayuan and Duanhua were seized by Yixin's men inside the palace. For Sushin, Yixin sent his brother Yixuan to arrest him. Sushin, unaware of events in Beijing, was caught in his bedroom at Mian, just outside the capital, while intimate with a woman. Yixuan's men broke down the door and captured him on the spot. With this, the Inyu coup succeeded. Post coup, the regency system was abolished. Cixi and Xian began ruling behind screens, while Yixin gained significant power for his role. Since the young emperor couldn't rule, a triumvirate formed: Cixi, Xian, and Yexin. They cooperated well initially, but eventually fell out. And the key event that played a crucial role was the Andahai incident, which became the watershed in the relationship among the three. This Andahai was Empress Dowager Cixi's most favorite eunuch, and since he risked his life to deliver messages to Yixin back then, helping Cixi seize power and making great contributions, he became even more favorite. So Andahai became even more arrogant. In the Qing Dynasty, the management of eunuchs was very strict. Regulations stated that eunuchs generally couldn't leave the palace, and if they did, they had to request leave and obtain a waist token from the imperial household department. When entering or exiting palace gates, there were guards to inspect, but by the late Qing period, these regulations started to loosen. Sometimes even the rulers themselves led in violating the rules, as mentioned by Gao Yang. The book mentions an incident during the Guangxu reign when Empress Dowager Cixi once gave some gifts to her sister and sent a few eunuchs to deliver them. But when these eunuchs were leaving the palace, they refused to cooperate with the guards' inspection as required, leading to a scuffle. Afterwards, Cixi, without asking for details, ordered severe punishment for the guards, showing that she herself didn't take the rules seriously. Therefore, Andahai, relying on his favor, started to scheme. At this time, Emperor Tongxi was about to get married, and Dehai then proposed to Cixi that he should go south to oversee the making of the dragon robe for the emperor so it could be used for the wedding, and while he was at it, buy some fine fabrics for Cixi. Cixi was swayed by Andahai's words, but remembered the rule that eunuchs couldn't leave the capital. So she came up with a workaround, giving Andahai a 2-month leave, allowing him to make the trip south during that time, but insisting he must keep a low profile and not draw attention. But once Andahai left the capital, he changed completely. He was arrogant towards officials and commoners along the way. and even displayed a large banner proclaiming he was an imperial envoy on a mission to procure the dragon robe. Um, Crucially, on a small flag attached to the large banner, he drew a three-legged crow. What is a three-legged crow? It's a mythical bird said to serve the Queen Mother of the West. By comparing himself to the three-legged crow, Ande Hai was explicitly telling others that his trip was approved by Cixi. This display brought him a fatal disaster. Quote, Dahai's usual arrogance had offended many people, including Empress Dowager Cixi, Yishin, and Emperor Tongji. And Dahai usually didn't pay attention to his behavior, causing many rumors to spread among the people all about those ambiguous matters between him and Cixi. So Empress Dowager Cixi felt that if he wasn't properly disciplined, it would be utterly disgraceful. Meanwhile, Yishin was managing the imperial household department with strong emphasis on frugality, and Dahai constantly encouraged Cixi toward lavish pleasures, earning nations' hatred. As for Emperor Tongji, and Dahai often invoked Cixi's authority to criticize and boss around the emperor, making Tongji despise him too. Since regulations mandated death for eunuchs leaving the capital, Yoshin now had grounds to execute on Dahai. Coincidentally, Cixi fell ill and withdrew temporarily, allowing the three to immediately unite against Ande Hai. CAN suggested having the emperor review memorials during Cixi's illness, both to assist her and train in governance. Cixi agreed without suspicion. Meanwhile, Ande Hai entered Shandong province. Ding Baozhen, governor of Shandong, documented Ande Hai's violations in a secret memorial to Emperor Tongxi. Upon receiving it, Tongxi immediately ordered Yishin to convene imperial household officials to decide Ande Hai's fate. They resolved to execute Ande Hai locally and confiscate his assets. After the emperor's personal decree, Ding Baozhen swiftly captured Ande Hai in Taiyan and executed him in Jinan. Cixi remained oblivious throughout. How did she react when learning the truth? When Tongji reported the execution, Cixi was furious. But since Ande Hai had broken the law, her testing would seem unreasonable. Tongji added that Ande Hai acted without Cixi's knowledge, preserving her dignity. She then publicly condemned Ande Hai while ordering imperial household reforms. This incident made Cixi realize Xian and Yishin could marginalize her any time. The subsequent empress selection deepened this fear. As Tongzi matured, they needed an empress to manage the imperial harem. Cixi favored the 14-year-old daughter of Feng Shu, believing her youth would ensure harem control. Xian preferred Alut, a Mongolian woman whose father was as Longyan. Feng Shu's daughter was too young to assist the emperor. Deadlocked, they let Tongji choose. As Tongji deliberated, Cixi reminded him no Mongolian had been empress since Kangxi's reign, hinting he should pick Feng Shu's daughter. Yet he chose Alut, devastating Cixi that her own son opposed her. After much contemplation, she concluded her son had been manipulated by Empress Dowager Cixi, which drove her determination to exclude both Xian and Yishin from power and monopolize authority. At this juncture, the trio fell out completely, with Cixi emerging as the ultimate victor. Why did this happen? This stemmed largely from Xian and Yishin's personal traits. First, consider Xian. In Gao Yang's portrayal, Cixi is a master manipulator of power, scheming and duplicitous, while by comparison, Xian appears sincere, loyal, kind-hearted, yet indecisive. To some extent, author Gao Yang crafted CGN's character to accentuate Cixi's, yet he avoided oversimplifying her portrayal. For instance, as she gained governing experience, Xian could hide daggers behind smiles, secretly opposing Cixi and winning at critical moments. Examples include executing Ande Hai and selecting Emperor Tongji's empress. One could argue anyone surviving years in the palace steps would develop such traits. But fundamentally, she never escaped Cixi's dominance. Next, Examine Yishan. Originally sidelined by Emperor Shanfeng, he gained power only through serendipitous alliance with Cixi and Xian. Thus, he operated cautiously. During the Xingyu coup, his seamless coordination with the empresses, dowager, plotting covertly, or maneuvering factions revealed meticulous strategy and courage. Yet his refusal to submit became a tool for Cixi to exploit. When bargaining with Yishan, Cixi manipulated him to speak first, seizing negotiation control. This exact tactic secured his agreement to eliminate Sushun. Yet throughout these clashes, Yixin still underestimated Cixi. While plotting the Xingyu coup, Yishan pondered, what if the Empress's dowager ruled behind screens? But he dismissed Cixi as just a woman, incapable of outmaneuvering elder statesmen. He likened her to Empress Louis Bang's wife, who ruled after his death, but ultimately preserved the Liu dynasty. He doubted Cixi could surpass Empress Liu, but envisioned himself restoring Isengiro imperial power, a mindset that doomed him to lose against her. Fundamentally speaking, Cixi's ultimate victory was also tied to the unique dynamic between her, Xian, and Yishan. The political alliance among the three was a clear triangular relationship. In this setup, Xian had the least skill, but as Empress Dowager to Emperor Shanfeng, she held the biggest nominal advantage. The book mentions that Emperor Xianfeng knew Xian wasn't good at political scheming, so he gave her a secret edict before he died. If Cixi ever acted treacherously later on, Xian could use this edict to eliminate her. At the same time, Xianfeng advised Xian to consult Sushan more often for important issues. However, this whole plan ended up being useless. Xian first helped Cixi get rid of Sushan, then later burned the secret edict right in front of Cixi, showing her trust in Cixi's character. But this honesty backfired, causing Cixi to panic and ultimately leading Cixi to poison Xian. Of course, the secret edict and poisoning of Xian are from unofficial histories and might not be true. But it's a fact that Xian died in 1881. She passed away too soon, throwing the original stable structure out of balance. Cixi became the one with the strongest legitimate claim, gaining an overwhelming edge over Yishan. Finally, in 1884, under the pretext of assigning blame for the Sino-French War, Cixi kicked Yishan out of the power center. Here's how it went down. At that time, the Qing army suffered a major defeat in the Sino-French War, and Minister Sheng Yu submitted a memorial demanding accountability for those responsible. In the memorial, Sheng Yu targeted all the Grand Counselors, attacking them as a group. His goal was to pressure the Grand Counselors into changing their stance and adopting a tough policy against France. So in his writing, he only skimmed the surface without pinning blame on specific individuals. But Cixi seized this chance to dismiss all the Grand Counselors led by Yishan. With that, Cixi officially rose to become the sole supreme ruler, marking the end of the first phase of her power journey. During these years of her power grab, the long-running Taiping and Neon rebellions were crushed, and the Qing Dynasty gradually recovered from instability, showing signs of revival. For her, power was firmly in hand, and the domestic scene was calming down. Life ahead should have been fantastic. But what she never saw coming was that she'd face even tougher times ahead. Now, all right, that wraps up the first half of Empress Dowager Cixi, the complete biography. You can find the listening notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.